I want to introduce the Gettysburg College team. We have Kay Etheridge and Lisa Bird and Val Stone. We're really glad to have them today. They are a B-WET funded project. They're doing a lot of work to embed their MWEE into the curriculum in a couple of different districts in Pennsylvania. And I just want to kind of talk for a second about what curricular integration is, just so we're kind of all talking about the same thing. So this is really thinking about sustainability of MWEEs and how to get them embedded into curriculum, working with the right people, and making sure that they're kind of lasting beyond just a grant period or a certain period where there's additional support. So these folks have a lot of helpful hints, and they have a lot of lessons learned, so I'm excited for everybody to learn from them today. So without further ado, Kay and team, I'm going to turn it over to you, and I'm going to mute myself.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, so the project that we are in the second year of B-WET funding is, we call it What's in the Water, and Advancing Science is our organization within Gettysburg College, and we have more than 20 years experience working with K-12 schools in our area. And we've used that experience and learned from our mistakes to find ways to work with what are very small school districts. Those of you who don't work in Pennsylvania may not realize, but every town has its own school district. They're not by county like in Maryland. So Gettysburg schools, area school district is the one that's closest to us. We're not serving them at the moment with this grant, but for example, the town is about 10,000 people, and there's one high school, one middle school, and a few, 3 elementary schools. And that's a huge district compared to some of the ones we're working with on this grant. So we'll talk a little bit about the specifics of that and how, because they're small districts, it's necessary to sort of personalize our approach with each district. Their curricula vary, the way their teachers deliver science varies. So there's a lot that we have to take into consideration. So just to give you a geographic layout, if you see the colorful counties at the bottom, south central Pennsylvania, on the left and on the right, we have these highlighted, and sort of the geographic area of the districts is outlined. We're working with 4 districts presently on this B-WET grant. The smallest is represented up fairly near Harrisburg, but it's a small district called Camp Hill. And as you can see on the bulletin points above, there's only 100 students per grade in that whole district. Our biggest district is Conewago, and it's 300 students per grade, so still small relative to a lot of districts around the country. The B-WET goals I'm not going to spend a lot of time on because all of you are familiar with these, I would think. But the sustainable delivery system is part of the focus of what we're talking about today, with the goals, of course, of promoting stewardship of the Bay watershed and improving the local watershed through these action projects and community education, which is a big part of what we're doing with our grant. So our target audience, what we decided to do, this is not our first B-WET grant, and what we've learned from doing things in the past was, in order to get every class in a school involved, we needed to have a way to make it sustainable and to really help the teachers. So we decided to use a tiered approach on this grant, and we are targeting just 4th through 6th grade teachers and students in four districts that were mentioned on the previous slide. And in year 1, which was last school year, we started with all of the 4th grade teachers and all of their students. And in total, that was only 24 teachers and 860 4th grade students across 4 districts. We are now in year 2, and we've added the 5th grade teachers and students. So that's about double the number of teachers and the number of students. And next year, which we're having both excitement and trepidation about, because we will be adding the 6th grade classes, and this will raise our number of teachers and students. However, what we're doing, as you will see, is trying to make the teachers, since most of these 24 teachers that we worked with last year, we're working with again this year, we're trying to make them self-sufficient. They're learning to more or less solo with some of the activities. We're still supporting them, and we still spend a lot of time in their classrooms, But the idea is by the time we are finished with this grant in the end of 3 years, these schools will have seen us a lot and will be comfortable continuing on their own, and will be integrating more and more every year, the MWEE sequence and activities into their curriculum of their school. So it's really embedded there, and it's easier for them to sustain it. So what we provide to the schools, what Advancing Science specifically provides, which almost everyone in every B-WET program, of course, does, is teacher development and training to have these investigative activity modules for helping them structure MWEE sequences. And where we might be a little different from some other providers is that our funding allows us to support classrooms throughout the year. We have other funding besides the NOAA funding, which helps with this. So that, is not something that everybody has the luxury of. And then our big difference is that we have mobile educators, both full-time and part-time, who go into the classrooms with supplies and equipment, and they work with the classroom teachers to team teach and work with the participating teachers. They do this intensively initially, and then after the first time or two that they've done a lesson, the teachers will start to, as I said before, solo more on their own. And we might just deliver the equipment in that case. And this is a model that we've used for 20 years, and it works very well. Val Stone and Lisa Bird are two of our mobile educators, but they also help develop the program, and they are full-time. We have also some wonderful part-time mobile educators too this year who help with things, especially with, for example, off-site field trips. And they're just excellent at that. And then the other thing we provide is guidance, and we'll give some specific examples how we help schools learn to reach out to the greater community through their teachers and their students. So I'm not going to elaborate on the MWEE sequence because hopefully you're all familiar with that, but here you see on the right some fourth grade students planting a butterfly garden last year. This was Littlestown, correct? Yes. Littlestown schools. And this year they got to see caterpillars and metamorphosis happening in their schoolyard. They had cocoons all over the side of the building because this butterfly garden worked, and it was extremely exciting. So that's just one example, and we'll give you some others of how we get the teachers and the students excited about having this in their curriculum. So what we've learned over the years is recruiting the school districts is an important first step, obviously, for everybody. But before we even submitted our proposal, we met with administrators from the 4 districts that we had in mind, and we invited them to Gettysburg. We fed them lunch, which unfortunately NOAA doesn't fund, but we had some money for that. It's money well invested because administrators will show up for a free lunch. And we got their feedback on what would be the best time to schedule teacher development, what would be a good way to integrate in the curriculum, what were some of the challenges they were working with STEM education, where did they want help. And this really helps with administrator buy-in. And we had another very funny example where 3 of the 4 superintendents who came were really on board, and the Conewago superintendent's very enthusiastic and supportive. And there was one that was new, a new district we hadn't worked with, and she was dragging her feet a little bit. But when she saw her colleagues were buying into this, it was clear she did not want to miss out on this for her district. And she ended up joining in. And that was, I think, important to have them all together in the same room. And then during the project, and let me just mention one more tool that we've learned to use. If we've worked with a teacher and been in his or her classroom extensively over the years, and we know they're really supportive of our program, we will often send them as an emissary to talk to their administrator and make sure the administrator saw the email from us or is going to respond, because if they hear from a teacher that they respect, that will also help. The teacher turnover tends to be not as high as administrator turnover. So we often have teachers we work with for years, and they may have 3 different superintendents in that time. So having the teachers help us with connecting to the administrators is really critical. And during the project, we keep the administrators in the loop. We recently had a teacher development workshop on campus, and I invited all 4 of the administrators to come, and 2 actually came to campus to observe the workshop. So that's an example of what works, and we also offered them free lunch that day too. So just saying. So in beginning the project, this was critical in sort of laying the groundwork. The first thing we did was Val and Lisa went to the districts. Val worked with 2 intensively, is working with 2, and Lisa's working with the other 2. So they get to really know those districts. And they went to the schools, met with the teacher on site. And one thing they did was they went out with the teachers and they assessed the schoolyard to look at what sorts of outdoor teaching activities could be done, what sort of projects could be done. And then we hit the teacher development. We hit the ground running on that very early, even before school really starts. We were working on that. We'll tell you more about that. And we kept at every stage emphasizing curricular integration. So Val Stone is going to talk about professional development and how we deliver it throughout the year so that we keep the teachers on task.
Hey, good morning. So as Kay mentioned, we have the professional development that runs throughout the school year. We've developed a couple of different opportunities for teachers to participate in the professional development so that it's ongoing throughout the school year and also suits their schedules. Each year, this being our second year of the project, we've started with the introductory summer workshop training. So last year, that was the 4th grade teachers participated in that introductory workshop. This year, the 5th grader teachers did, and then next year will be our 6th grade teachers. These introductory summer trainings were school-specific trainings. So I went and visited with the 2 schools that I work with. Lisa went and visited with her 2 schools, and that allowed us to really customize the training agenda so that we were sure that we were meeting the needs of that specific school's curriculum. The other advantage of hosting these introductory summer trainings at each school site was it gave the teachers and Lisa and I a chance to all work together in the schoolyard, as Kay mentioned, so that we could help them to identify opportunities in their schoolyard to extend classroom learning. In addition to the summer workshop training, we bring all of the teachers together in October for a group workshop here on campus. So last year, that was our 24 4th grade teachers. This year, we had a large audience. It was our 48 4th and 5th grade teachers. At that workshop, we offered opportunities for the teachers to become more familiar with some of our curriculum materials, and they also met with Pennsylvania State Park environmental educators that helped to develop outdoor education pedagogy skills. Our teachers are very confident in the classroom, but learning outside looks a little different, and so by partnering our teachers with park educators, it helped them to learn some tips and tricks to be successful teaching students outside. We also offer online training modules. Those are posted on our Schoology site. Those modules look different. They're usually about an hour long each, and the teachers can complete those at their convenience. One of the more effective professional developments that we've done is meeting specifically with the teachers at their schools to do curriculum integration. Now this works a little bit better if it's done a little bit later in the process, so the teachers have had an opportunity to work with us a little bit, get familiar with our materials, and how the students respond to those materials. Then we can take time to really work on integrating our materials into their existing curriculum, and we'll talk in more detail about that later on. And lastly, our last component of professional development is co-teaching. And so that's where our mobile educators, our advancing science staff, will work directly with the teachers, partnering in the classroom to team teach. And so that is the professional development that goes on throughout the year. At the end of last year, our first year of the project, we surveyed our teachers to find out what areas were they interested in further training for years 2 and 3. And so we'll use the results of that survey as we're developing our professional development this year. The numbers that you see on the right are the percent of our teacher respondents that agreed that those were areas they would like to see more training in. So we already started addressing some of those at our early October workshop, getting more with the outdoor learning. We always emphasize hands-on learning, so we continue to offer more activities to get the teachers familiar with those. Our resources, B-WET resources, and the number of other environmental education organizations that have provided resources, like the GLOBE program, for example. And a little look at our results from last year, some of our teacher self-reported growth in a couple of our very important areas, being getting the teachers confident and comfortable learning outdoors. And so if you take a look at the last 3 options down there, learning outdoors is a meaningful part of my science curriculum. In pre-testing, we found that only 18% of our teachers really agreed or strongly agreed with that statement that learning outdoors was important. And after the end of the first year, we did see a 350% increase in teachers who felt that that was a meaningful part of their curriculum. In addition to that, they also felt more confident working outside. And so as the teacher confidence increases, then that's going to be reflected in the curriculum and in how they emphasize that. Their enjoyment of leading those outdoor lessons also increased. I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Lisa Bird, and she is going to continue talking about our program.
Thank you, Val. So what we want to make sure that is very important to all of us is that we don't come in and overwhelm the teachers with new additions, because they hesitate. When they saw us at our first meeting, I could sense the hesitation, like, what are you adding to us? They've all realized that we're bringing lots to their classroom and really a good addition for them. We want to make sure that we fulfill state standards. So any activities we have are aligned with our state standards. We are actually working towards, Pennsylvania has not incorporated NGSS yet. That's something that we're working towards, and we have gotten the feeling that our teachers are kind of happy that we're working in that direction also. Along with the state standards, we want to make sure that we fulfill the school curriculum, which in Pennsylvania they're different from school district to school district. So the specialized treatment that Val had mentioned in her statements is really important, because we don't want to come in with, okay, we're going to be doing the water cycle now. And if that's not what their plan is, we are overwhelming them with additional work, and we don't want that. We also, in Pennsylvania, have, of course, the standardized testing. This is really in the forefront of most teachers' minds. How will what we bring to the classroom enhance their students' learning for the standardized testing? And I think we found that it has really helped. Once we convince the teachers that this is not going to be additional work for them, we start to get their buy-in. The other buy-in that we have to have is from the administrators. From a previous grant, we found that if we had a teacher that had gone to the administration and they were not really initially bought into this whole program, they had some issues in sustaining working with our program. So in this grant, we have both buy-in from our administrators and from our teachers, which is what has really made it successful. And I have to say, sometimes having buy-in from the facilities department is a
Yeah.
good buy-in too. So, so far, things have been working well for us. In terms of outdoor experience, as Val had mentioned, there was a level of discomfort. And in order to get sustainability of outdoor field experiences, we really feel like we have to model some good activities for them and show them just a quick 30-minute outdoor activity can make such a big difference in the classroom. And it'll tie in with your classroom activities and support that data that they're receiving there. So by working with our workshop, we actually brought in Pennsylvania State Department of State Park Department for Pennsylvania Pennsylvania. We brought educators in from there, and during the workshop, they held a session, a whole morning session, just of ideas of how to manage classroom outside, because it's a whole different feature managing a classroom outside than it is inside. And from our survey, there were a number of teachers, obviously, that did not enjoy managing them outside, but thankfully we're seeing that improvement, that they actually are enjoying being outside again. So those teacher trainings are very important, not just from us modeling during a classroom or outdoor visit, but also from having those that are specifically experienced in working outdoors, like our Pennsylvania State Department educators, State Park Department educators. Sorry about that. Another thing that's very important is for sustainability is we have to develop partnerships for the teachers in order to continue to go on field trips. We are taking just the 4th grade on field trips. Our 5th grade and 6th grade classes will not participate in field trips, but by going on that field trip, the State Parks Department of Pennsylvania can now provide them funding for transportation, even if the B-WET grant is gone. So that partnership is important, not only for transportation, but just the fact of finding locations of where should we go? What's a great outdoor activity that we can go? And it's surprising the number of teachers that really aren't familiar with parks in their area. So that partnership is very important. Throughout the whole grant, it's good to engage your administrators, invite them to your workshops, which we were surprised that they actually came and joined us. I think they got to see their teachers in action as they started to discuss some of their MWEE plans for the rest of the year. And I feel like they were impressed as what their teachers were pursuing for the rest of the year. But without that help of the administrators coming into the classroom and seeing what value you bring to their students, those teachers aren't going to feel that same support. And without the support from their administrators, it's a battle for us to continue. So for the teacher's sake, we need to continue to engage the administrators so that they see that we are bringing value, because the administrators, as much as the teachers, are looking for their standardized test scores. And if they don't feel that this is bringing value, then this will be a low priority to them. So one example that I had with a classroom activity and then an outdoor activity is we were looking at stream maps for Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania's streams are part of the curriculum for all 4th graders in social studies. So we were looking at it as a social studies activity rather than a science day activity. And the student actually said, hey, our stream doesn't have a name. Can we name it? So that higher level thinking is from a 4th grade student. And when an administrator can see that, they'll see that it's going to follow through into their testing and their overall education. Making our activities cross-curricular are very important, because then it can fit in any part of the day. And especially our stewardship and civic actions, they're all going to be cross-curricular because they involve social studies, math, journaling, civic involvement, and citizen science programs are really important because it sustains throughout their whole lifetime. So elementary students, once they get to middle school or high school, they're going to be focusing on science. But in elementary school, we have found that our teachers tend to not have as much time for science as possible. So if I can fit in measuring surface area of the schoolyard for runoff into the math class, that's a great way to incorporate it. And so PA streams, that's a social studies activity, surface area, math activity, it all fits in together. Camp Hill is our smallest school district, and I just want to talk a little bit about logistics for that. Most of our schools, the whole grade is learning one topic at the same time. Camp Hill, they have a rotation of multiple topics throughout each 6-week period. So a teacher is specialized in teaching that topic. The students will rotate throughout the year for that 6-week period. So it makes it difficult sometimes to engage all of the students at the same time. So not only do we have to be concerned about the curriculum fitting in, but we also have to work with the teachers in the timing. I can't just go in and say, okay, we're going to be looking at watersheds now. Instead, we looked at PA streams because the whole school was looking at Pennsylvania watersheds because they were studying Pennsylvania at that time. So be cognizant of what their needs are in terms of timing. Another thing that we incorporated, which I feel like has been a really big impact, is multiple on-site science days, where it may just be one activity where all the students can cycle through, or it might be multiple educators. So Val, myself, and one of our part-timers will come, and we'll just have an on-site field trip, investigating a lot of different things that we can all tie together. And that way, you won't have to go back to that same school 6 times, 6 to incorporate those multiple activities right there. And students really respond to that in terms of it is a science day and they're going to focus on science and all of our watershed activities that we bring with it. Select activities which are cross-curricular. Just about anything can be cross-curricular. You just have to convince your teachers that it's going to be, you follow up with the math part, or you can follow up with the social studies part of it. We need to build teacher confidence for comfort and sustainability. If our teachers don't feel comfortable going outdoors with their students, they're not going to do it. And I've seen a big improvement in my classes at Camp Hill, that they have a wonderful facility, but they hardly used it. And now they are actually turning their annual picnic hike to the stream from a picnic hike to an environmental study hike the whole way down. So we have seen the development in just 1 year in terms of our teacher comfort, and that's probably one of the most important things for sustainability of getting your students outdoors. So I'm going to pass this over to Val now, and she's going to talk about our largest district.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to take a few, this opportunity to focus specifically on some examples of ways that our schools have incorporated our resources into their curriculum. So when we were originally planning the grant application, we collected the scope and sequence documents from each of these schools, or basically the curriculum for their 4th through 6th grade, our target age groups. And we compared all of those documents to find similarities to one another and also connections to watershed education. So the topics that we identified were ecosystems, soils, water, and weather. So those were common across our participating districts. They're in the Pennsylvania Science Standards. They are tested on that standardized testing that Lisa mentioned earlier. So once we'd identified these topics, we worked to develop curriculum materials to support these. So some of the curriculum materials we developed from scratch. Others we modified from existing resources, like from the B-WET resources, or sometimes we maybe just purchased an entire kit that was already all prepared and standalone. We keep these materials here at our campus in our lab, and we have them available throughout the year for teachers to borrow on their own, to invite one of our mobile educators to come and co-teach, or sometimes a combination with, there's some co-teaching and some loaning of the materials. So once we'd identify these, the next step in our programming was to start those introductory summer trainings that I mentioned earlier. And as I mentioned, those were school-specific trainings, so those agendas were tailored specifically to, for example, my 4th grade teachers at Conewago Valley Intermediate School. And their focuses were weather, soils, and ecosystems were the 3 topics that really integrated well with their curriculum. Now, this group of teachers chose to incorporate these materials in different ways. So for their weather topic, they fully adopted our advancing science resources. So here's a couple images of a few of the resources that we have put together into what we call the weather theme box. There's content readers, there's models, there's games, there's a lot of cloud resources, most of those coming from the GLOBE program. And those were all packaged together, and the teachers had decided that their existing weather resources were not effective in preparing their students for the science exam that they take at the end of 4th grade. So they borrowed this kit during our summer training. We had an opportunity to practice with these resources, so the teachers felt confident then replicating the activities with their students in the classroom. In addition to classroom materials, we also provide materials for use in the field. So the image that you see on the right with the students with their arms outstretched, they are practicing some of the skills they learned in the classroom to observe the clouds. So they're establishing their quadrant right there. Quadrant is in between their fingertips, and so they're looking to see what different types of clouds are in their field of view there. The image on the left, you can see a couple students with rain gauges. Most of our equipment we use on a loaner basis, but the rain gauge is one exception where we did install those permanently on each of our 4 school grounds. The students are monitoring that on a daily basis as part of the COCO-RA's Citizen Science Program. Lisa mentioned the importance of getting students involved in those citizen science projects. We also have weather tools, typical weather tools such as anemometers, thermometers, barometers. We find that these tool-based activities are where the teachers especially like to have those co-teaching visits initially. It helps give them a little bit more confidence if they can see how the mobile educators are modeling and explaining tool use. And then in subsequent years, they'll feel more confident in doing that on their own. So in the case of these weather tools, the teachers fully adopted the materials that we had laid out for them. Another place where we found that the teachers needed a lot of extra support is in the data analysis side of things. So the map that you see on the bottom with the stars there, that's a screenshot of the COCO-RA's daily precipitation maps, and the stars are our school sites. So those students are going out each morning, they're looking in their rain gauge to see how much rain fell in the previous 24 hours, and then they're logging that data to the citizen science site. The image that you see on the right is students then synthesizing that data. So we took all of their precipitation measurements and we tallied it to find monthly precipitation, and then the students are creating a graph there to compare this year's monthly precipitation with the average annual precipitation that's expected for our area. And we found that this type of graphing activity is not something that the teachers were confident in leading on their own. So this was really a new aspect for them. And the students really responded well to seeing their finished product and being able to quickly draw some conclusions based upon the graphs that they had generated. So that was one example. They fully integrated our materials and basically replaced out all of the weather materials that they had been previously using. Another way that they incorporated our materials is just on a supplementary basis. Elementary schools in our area are starting to adopt the FOSS curriculum kits. These curriculum kits represent a pretty large time and financial commitment on the part of the district, and didn't want to rock the boat too much there. But what we did find is these FOSS kits are lacking in an outdoor education component. And so that's where we were able to come in and supplement with some of our resources. So on the left there, you see students investigating the soil conditions in their schoolyard. So they had already done, using that FOSS kit, they'd already done a lot of classroom investigation. So now they're looking to see, and they've discovered that their schoolyard is essentially clay and the water just sits in their schoolyard. On the right-hand side, you see students participating in another citizen science program that's called Project North. These are the tulip test gardens. The students had planted these tulips in the fall. They logged the date that they planted these tulips with the Project North program. And then in the spring, they kept an eye on that planting area to note the date that the tulips started to emerge, and then again when the tulips started to bloom. All that data was shared with the Project North program so that the students could see the progression of spring across the country as evidenced by the blooming tulips. So we found it's a successful way to kind of mesh with those FOSS kits in a way that gets the students continuing those outdoor investigations to keep the teacher confidence up in terms of their ability to manage classrooms outside. And the third way that these teachers have incorporated our resources is to kind of integrate them with existing materials. So my teachers at Conewago Valley, they had over the years developed their own packet of materials for their ecosystems unit. The packet, they had certain aspects of the packet of materials that they enjoyed and they wanted to keep, but they had other aspects. It was a very research heavy, the students doing lots of research projects, making a poster, and they wanted more hands-on learning. So we were able to swap out some of their research projects with a little bit more hands-on learning. On the left, you see students investigating animal tracks. So as they're looking at that, they're looking at evidence of animal traces. They're also looking specifically at those footprints and thinking about adaptations that those animals have to help them be successful. So they're thinking about pads and claws and paws and webs on those footprints. We have some content readers, the center image that you see there. Those are content readers that are specific for the elementary level. Some of our schools are lacking in anything that sort of resembles a textbook. So these content readers help to give them a place to read from and tie back to their specific curriculum. On the right, you see our habitat dioramas. Those are a really popular kit. The kids get materials and they have to create sort of a museum style diorama to explain the habitat needs of different plants and animals there. And also we had some outdoor activities to supplement that. We used to see some journaling in the classroom. That's been something or journaling in the schoolyard, excuse me. That's something we've been emphasizing hard. And then also some students doing some insect netting. So in the sense of this unit, they kind of took their activities, our activities, and meshed them together. And we accomplished that through one of those mid-year curriculum integration meetings. So this happened after the teachers had a chance to kind of get to know us a little bit, get to know the goals of the program. We met during the school day. A couple of the lead teachers came out from that school and we sat down and we rewrote their ecosystems curriculum to really mesh our activities in with ours. And they culminated in their action project where the students planted a bunch of trees in the schoolyard. You can see some of the comments that the students had after that event, and you can see that they're really sort of tying together all those different things they learned about throughout the year. So they're thinking about precipitation that they've been monitoring via the CocoRAS program. They're thinking about their soil conditions and the fact that their schoolyard does lots of flooding. And then they're thinking about the needs of plants and animals and how can they provide for those needs. And I'm going to pass it off to Kay to wrap us up.
So I guess the take-home message from this, to summarize, is you need to get buy-in from the teachers and administrators if you're going to have curricular integration. And we've used a lot of different tools to do that. And it seems to be working. We're always learning new things. And one thing we always run into is that every one of these small districts is different and has slightly different needs. So it's quite labor intensive to do it this way. But I guess it's paying off. So having the tiered approach was part of what's making this successful, because we only were sort of dealing with one grade at a time in a new way in these schools. So that worked. So I guess we can have questions at this point.
Thanks, Kay and Val and Lisa, for that. Really fantastic. For me, one of the things that sticks out, especially hearing Val and Lisa talk about the teachers that you work with, it's clear that you all have a really in-depth understanding of kind of what's going on at the school itself. Just the way that you talk about, sitting down from the very start, talking scope and sequence, and identifying some of those areas that teachers need better resources for. I mean, I think that's really what is helping to support and really helping you all to get this, your MWEE integrated into the curriculum. So a lot of good tidbits in here. I did want to open it up to questions. So we have a couple of questions around the professional development that I'll ask. Tara and Holly were wondering about how many days are the summer workshops? Is the training mandatory? And how do you get teachers, how do you incentivize them to attend?
So for this grant, because of the timing of the funding, we didn't know far enough in advance to plan a summer workshop. And that's one issue. The other issue is getting attendance at summer workshops can be problematic because that's when teachers take family vacations. And we wanted to get the best attendance that we could. So this was something that we talked about with the administrators in the planning meeting with them before we even wrote the grant. And we worked instead, in the past, we had done week-long and even occasionally 2-week-long summer workshops. But we were able to pay teachers really large stipends to attract them. And that also attracted individual teachers from widespread schools, because you couldn't get buy-in from a whole school. You can't tell a whole school's worth of 4th grade teachers. You have to spend a week of your summer going to a workshop. And you can, but I don't think that's going to go over very well. And it's expensive. People need childcare during the summer and things like that. It's just expensive and it's difficult. So we decided that foregoing an intensive summer workshop and spreading the professional development out over the year would both get more attendance by the teachers and would also continually reinforce it throughout the year. I think it actually works better. They are incentivized in that when they complete all of the professional development, they get a stipend. And if they don't get the stipend, or they only get part of the stipend, is how we work it. So we track it. We have ways of tracking, for example, the online modules, whether they're doing them or not. And so hopefully that answers your question. I'm not sure I addressed all parts of the question. Did you want to add anything, Valerie?
We had just the single day is what we did before the school year started with our groups. And what Lisa and I actually did is we went, because these are such small districts, we could go in and sit down with the 3 to 6 teachers that we're working with at that school, and we could all sit down with our calendars and pick a date that worked. So for our summer workshops, that was agreement between Lisa and her teachers and me and my teachers, and it was easy because it was that small group. So we did have 100% attendance at our summer workshops. Our fall workshop is a little tougher because there's one school that is actually out that day, and so we have not had success getting them to come in because the teachers are already released on that day. Our other schools, it's an existing professional development day for the school, and so the administrators they excuse the teachers from their school-wide professional development to come to us.
One other thing for the mid-year where we would reevaluate the curriculum integration is that we offer sub-pay for the teachers. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of subs in Pennsylvania, so it can be difficult to get enough subs to cover the whole grade level. But if we can get 2 or 3 of our teachers to be available, that sub-pay is a real benefit for us.
And one thing that we didn't really emphasize in our presentation was that something that helps embedding in the curriculum and sustainability is that you have these cohorts of teachers working together. And the 5th grade teachers are very motivated now because they don't want the 4th grade teachers to know more than they do. So you can imagine how the 6th grade teachers will feel. So the professional development, that's the motivation for them being involved in professional development too, is sort of a camaraderie and a pride in what they're doing. So that helps too.
Those are great tidbits. Kristen asked, how large is a large stipend for summer training? Sharing.
What did we used to pay? We were rolling in money for a while, not from NOAA, but from some private foundations and some state funding. And what were we giving?
I think you're almost predating us.
Yeah, it was, a couple of $100 a day or something like that. It was enough to cover their childcare, their transportation, and to make it worthwhile for a teacher to want to attend. But the problem was we'd have like one teacher. If we were working with the districts we had now, we might have had one teacher from each school attend. And so we weren't doing systemic implementation in a school. We were doing a scattershot approach. But that's also how we got established across 6 counties in Pennsylvania, was with the scattershot approach. But then as we grew and grew, we realized that's not great for a small staff to be running all over the place. It's better to be able to go to a school and be there all day and hit all of the classes. So the systemic, across the school works better, both for us and I think for sustainability in the school as well.
For our summer workshop this year, the one day, it was 140 is what we offered to the teachers when they're off contract. So,
yeah, but when we were doing these summer workshops, it was years ago, and there's been inflation, so it's kind of hard. Adjusting for inflation, it might be like $300 a day now. Yeah.
Kelly has a question. So Citizen Science and Project North, maybe you guys could offline about what that is, but maybe a quick description on what Project North is. And she's saying that she specifically works with 6th grade students with block scheduling in Virginia. So, she knows her situation, but are your mobile educators trained in teaching?
Yes, they are, and they're very experienced. They've been with me, both of them, more than a decade, and they came in with experience teaching. So that's a must. And even our part-time people are experienced teachers. But Project North, you could just Google it. It's pretty cool, tulip planting. And there's other aspects of it too. It's not just the tulip bulbs, but that is something that, gets the students very engaged. Digging in the dirt. We get student feedback saying digging in the dirt and getting dirty is wonderful. I don't know how the teachers feel about it, but the students do like it.
And just to clear up, so we spend a lot of time in the classroom each year. So 4th grade, Val and I were probably in their classrooms 10, 11 times throughout the year.
Per class?
Per class.
Per school.
Per school.
Per school.
So 10, so that's, so we were able to get in and we actually led the classes. That's where our main our main training came for the teachers. They could watch us do it 2 or 3 times with the classes that they actually brought in for us to lead. And now my 4th grade from one of my schools is completely independent of me. I only get to visit them occasionally, which I miss those teachers. And they're like, we miss you, but we got it on our own now. So their ability to observe us doing it in the classroom twice, rather than just saying, here's the document of how to do it. But we model it for them, all of the activities, and now they've taken it on their own. So,
and the beauty of the tiered approach is that all the 4th graders we had last year are now 5th graders in with the teachers getting that training, and they are bringing what they know. These students have been nature journaling for a while now. So in a way, the students can help train the teachers.
Well, that's fantastic to hear. If anybody else has any more questions, feel free to type them into the chat now, or you can also unmute yourself and ask live. Give a couple more minutes for questions.
Well, we have a website. If you Google Advancing Science at Gettysburg College, you can also see, some of what we do that way too.
And we have, our activities are in Dropbox if you wanted to look at any of our activities that we share with not just our NOAA attendees, but also all of the teachers that we work with throughout the rest of the year.
Well, I don't see any more questions coming in, but I just wanted to thank each of you again so much for sharing this with us. Like I said, this recording or this webinar is being recorded, so we will share this out via the email. And we do have a couple more webinars coming up. Just a reminder, those are December 4th at 4 p.m. on curricular integration in large districts, which looks probably vastly different than what it looks like in rural Pennsylvania. And then Friday, January 3rd at 2 p.m., we have that webinar with Earth Force talking about student-led action. If you have any other questions, we'll hang on here for a couple more minutes, but otherwise, thanks everyone for joining us. And we hope to continue these. If you have ideas for things that you'd like to see as a topic, feel free to send us an email. We're happy to make accommodations and try to keep these as relevant as possible. So thanks everyone, and have a great week.
Thank you.
Thanks, Louise.